everybody, Ben Nelson, the everyday real estate investor here with another podcast episode. I am super excited because we have an awesome guest today. We have Pete Reese with Reelvest, and we're going to be talking about a cool niche, just bare land and land flipping. So I'm super excited about this. I think this is something that I haven't done personally, but I'm excited to learn about it. So Pete, thanks for being here.
Well, great to be here, and
Yeah,
thanks for having me,
awesome.
Ben.
Well, let's start out. Why don't we talk a little bit about your history, your background, and then what brought you into this niche of real estate investing or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, right? How did you get into land flipping? Tell us your background.
Yeah, it's funny. I never would have thought that I would end up in land flipping as my expertise. I never considered myself someone that was a land specialist in any way. In fact, I kind of began my real estate career like a lot of people with buying our first home, and this was just a house to live in back in the year 2000 down here in San Diego. We did all right with the home just because the market sort of started to rise back then, and we made about $50,000 after holding it for about 2 years. And we thought we were real estate moguls. Um, then we bought another house that needed a little bit of work. We fixed that up. We were doing well on that, and started buying homes to flip. So we got into flipping back in the kind of early to mid 2000s. And we are doing that for a while until the market crashed in 2007 ish. And just before then, I had actually gotten my broker's license here in California, and I just did it to give me more access to
Yeah.
some of the deals I was buying and show myself properties and
Yep.
things like that. But it was kind of a really, really good timing because when the market crashed, basically all that was selling were bank owned properties. And my wife kind of pushed me. She's like, "Hey, you should just get into listing bank owned properties." So I really dove into that, and I became one of the largest REO listing brokers, kind of in our area, in our specific little area, for a while. And that was great because that's all that was selling, and a lot of people in real estate at that time were struggling, and I was thankful to have that business coming in. But selling bank owned properties is not the most ideal profession
It's
in a lot of
challenging. It's
ways,
got its challenges,
but
right? Yeah.
it's challenging. There's a lot of emotions involved. You're actually dealing with people that are still living in the home after the foreclosure is done, and
Yeah.
things like that. So there's a lot of tricky situations that came up as a result of that. And I don't look back on that time as favorable in any way, but I guess I am thankful that that opportunity was there, and we were actually able to bring in money in real estate when a lot of people
Yeah.
weren't.
Yeah.
So uh, yeah, so through that, I kind of met a bunch of larger investment companies that were buying up flips even at that time, and I just started finding them deals. So like for a number of years, I was just kind of focused on finding them deals and bring them, like writing offers for them all over the place, getting as many good properties locked up for them as I could. And it was a good thing for them because they were looking for as many deals as they could get. I knew exactly what they were looking for because I had done the other side of it, and I knew kind of how to get these deals locked up and what it would take. So I did that for a number of years, then kind of got sidetracked into another business with my wife, doing online training for bloggers and travel bloggers. As a family of five, we were traveling kind of all over the world about 150 days out of the year as a result of that. So that was a great experience and everything, but it was completely out of the real
Yeah.
estate game. But we got a little burned out on that, so we got kind of the itch to get back into real estate and real estate investing. I was kind of researching different models that we could do, and I stumbled into land investing and land flipping, and it just kind of resonated with me. I would see some anecdotes from people talking about how they were doing with it. Hey, I bought this property for 10,000, I sold it for 30,000, and I was like, that sounds pretty cool. I'd like to be able to invest 10,000 and triple my money quickly. So then I went down this whole rabbit hole, bought a training course on it, and really learned everything I could about how to evaluate land specifically for this model. And then we sold our first property in March of 2021 using this model. And then we ended up 2021 doing about 1.2 and some change in revenue with about 50% gross profit margin. So on average, we were able to buy a property and double it, like sell it for double what we bought
Nice.
it for. And then 2022, we ended up at about 3.5 million, and the same thing, about 50% gross profit margins. And 2023, hoping to triple that and do
That's
10 million
awesome.
this year.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely
So kind of a
possible.
long road to get to that. That
Yeah.
that this little sector of land investing. Dabbled here
Yeah.
and there in some other things, then kind of took a little off ramp for a while in another business, and ultimately ended up on land flipping. So that's awesome. What specific was there something specific about the land flipping aspect that drew you to it? Was it the style? Was it the people that you thought you'd be working with? Was it just you just saw opportunity there? What was it that drew you to that specific uh, energy?
Well, I like a business like that is completely controllable from a lead flow type perspective. Like I knew we generate all of our leads and all of our deals with direct mail, and it's kind of a very simple thing. It's we send out a 2-page letter. The first page is explaining why we're contacting them, who we are, and what we can do for them. And the second page is actually a 1-page offer on their property. So we send those out, and I like the business model because I knew that the more of those I send out, the more deals that would come back. And that's like definitely the biggest lever that you can control, and that's very controllable. So I like that. And I also like the fact that like not every property is the same, and I feel like I excel personally in kind of being able to look at something and see the
Yeah,
value there. Maybe where other people weren't. Maybe if we could do something little to the property to value add it, or just to kind of recognize a deal when I see I feel like I'm good at recognizing a deal when I see one.
yeah. Okay.
So I'm not always perfect, but I feel like generally I've got a pretty good
Yeah,
grasp
and
on that. So I like both of
okay,
those
and you mentioned
aspects.
value add, so I would venture to guess that this is much different than buying a 20 unit apartment complex or something that needs a bunch of
Yes.
renovations to bring it up to today's standards, right? So this is you know
Right.
you might do a little bit. I mean, I guess give us a few examples of what you might do to value add, but it's going to be a
Sure.
lot different than doing something like that.
Yeah, and most of the value add stuff we do are really pretty simple. Like it could be clearing paths in a property so people can actually access it. Like a lot of these properties we buy are fully wooded properties. They're rural properties. They're fully wooded. Maybe the property owner hadn't been even on that property in 10, 20 years,
Yeah,
so cutting paths even through the property to kind of access it, so then potential buyers could see what it is they're buying. That's actually a huge thing, and increases the value kind of
yeah,
substantially in
yeah.
some
So some
cases.
access stuff, things like that. But you're not doing things like
Yeah.
you're not adding like buildability items like well and septic and things like that, are you?
We do perk
Okay.
tests quite often. So yeah, if it's a property that we know would be a good home site, or we could also market it as a potential home site, and we're pretty certain that we can get a good perk test there, then we will go ahead and do that, because that definitely helps the marketability. If it's $800 or $1,000 to get a soil scientist out to the property to do that, it will definitely get more than that back generally. um, and then sometimes we'll do a survey, if it's required, if there's an old survey on the property or something. And then here and there, we'll actually do minor subdivisions. And in a lot of these states that we're working in order to subdivide a property, it's pretty simple. You just hire a surveyor to go out there, and he maps it out, stakes it out in the ground, and then submits the map to the county. And then you can sell
Wow.
those parcels
So on that
individually.
note,
Yeah.
where, if you don't mind sharing, like what areas are you targeting and why is that? There's a lot in that question because, like, is it like
Yeah.
ease of doing things like that has you targeting them? Is it the market itself? Is it just what is drawing you to like what markets are you working in, and then like what is drawing you to be focused in those areas?
Yeah, really good questions. Well, for the most part, right now, I'm working in the Southeast and the East Coast, like New York down to Florida, that
Okay.
whole range down through there. And it kind of, a lot of these markets just kind of stumbled in. Like, one thing I look at before I'll send out any sort of marketing or any sort of mail to an area is there an active market? Are things buying and selling in that county? If we get a good property and we're able to price it right, are there buyers there? So I look for that, and generally, kind of that whole that whole region really, most of that fits into that criteria. We stay away from places where there's a huge glut of inventory and not a lot of purchases going on. So we try to
Yeah. So
avoid
supply
those.
and
But
demand is a
things,
yeah big part of it. Yep.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So the thing with some of those areas, they are a lot easier to do things like that than they would like to do a minor subdivision than say California where I'm at. It's where it's a very laborious process and time consuming and costs a lot of money. So it is definitely helpful to have those types of things there. But I kind of stumbled into some of the major areas that we're working on. Not stumbled into them, but I kind of targeted them, and then we ended up getting a good contacts in those areas, which makes me want to buy more and more
Yeah.
properties in those
Yeah.
areas.
Start building your team, and it makes it a little
Yeah,
easier to manage your
yeah,
business there. So, how are you? Do you have like certain criteria that you? Because obviously, you could pull a list or something from you talk to your title company. I don't. We'll get into like maybe some of the tools if you're willing to share that you use, but
yeah,
um, is there certain criteria that about the property itself or the owner or any of that stuff that you're like, well, we're not gonna because direct mail is great, but it's also very expensive. We do some direct mail
yes,
as well, and it's not cheap. So you want to make sure that you're
right.
sending to it's like anything you're putting yourself out there. You don't expect like everybody's going to call you, right? You just need that one little piece, but you still want it to be effective and be sending it to people that are maybe more likely to contact you, I think, right? So,
Right.
um,
Yep.
tell me a little bit about like how you're targeting or what you're like. Well, we're not going to send to this for whatever reason. Just a little bit more of your parameters, if you mind share, don't mind sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we're pulling lists, first of all, we use DataTree,
Okay.
which is a First American company, and they compile information from all the different parcels in the United States. I'm sure there's a couple counties that they don't have, but for the most part, they cover the whole U.S. And then we just kind of filter. Now, for most areas, we're looking for 10-acre plus parcels, and that generally takes us away from the big cities and even like the smaller suburban areas outside of those cities. So it's kind of rural, most of these properties that we buy, just because they're easier for the most part. So we use that kind of as a major criteria. I'm not really breaking it down further as far as out of state owners or how long they've owned the property or things like that. Like I I probably could be a lot more defined on my list, but to be honest, when I find an area that I like, where we're starting to build good contacts and things, I want to send as much mail to those areas as I can. So I try not to take out too much stuff. I know other investors are very they spend a lot of time and effort really refining their lists, and they probably get a better return on their mail than I do. But when I look at my mail costs, for instance, the big metric that I look at is how much does it cost me in mail for each deal that I get? And right now that's about 3,200 for every deal that I get. And for average deal or average profit per deal, when I kind of calculate it based off of all the things that we've done, is about $22,000 profit
Yeah.
per deal.
Yeah.
So if I'm at 3,000 per deal, I'm happy with that. I mean, if I could get it down to 1,500 or 1,000, that would be a
Yeah.
lot better. But I'm not really too
Yeah, but it
concerned about it
also
at this point, I guess.
comes down to yeah, you can spend a lot of time refining your list too, right? And
Right.
it's like okay, so you got it down from 3,000 to 2,700, but how much time did you spend doing that? And to save $300 on your mailing list.
Yeah. And you know what I worry about? I worry about missing that
I do
deal.
that same thing on mine.
I like
I used to
yeah.
overanalyze the heck out of that and just try to figure out. And I think there's there's a value in both. I think schools of thought and being super targeted versus just kind of the more shotgun approach. Um,
Yeah, I think like when you're starting out, like when you're starting out in the business, you can spend some more effort being like really refined on your list, and that way you don't have to spend as much in that mail, and hopefully you'll get a great return, and that will help you
that's a
really
really
get
good
things
point.
going.
Yeah,
But
when you
I
don't
think,
maybe have
yeah,
that budget to send out that many, you maybe get a little bit more target on your area or something like that, just to kind of hone it in for sure. Yep.
yeah. I mean, right now we're sending out 50,000 letters a month, so it costs about $25,000 a month just
It's a
for
lot of
the
mail.
direct mail. But
It's a lot of mail.
yeah, it's a lot of mail.
Seems to be
Yeah,
working
but
though.
well worth
Seems
it
to be
though.
working. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's working.
you mentioned one of the tools you use. What is that basically the only tool that you're using, that data tree tool, or is there something else?
Well, that's what we use to pull our lists, but we use a number of other tools. The big one that we use to evaluate land is MapRight.
Okay.
And MapRight is a really cool tool because you can put in the county and the parcel number, and it's going to zoom it into satellite images for that particular parcel. You'll see all the lot lines. You'll be able to do different overlays of different satellite images from different times or different vendors. You'll see wetlands. You'll see FEMA flood zone. You'll see the contours on the property. You'll see obviously access to the road, public roadways, and things like that. So I can tell a lot about a property just from my desk here in California, no matter where it is in the United States. That's probably about 90% of the property, but we have a lot of other due diligence that happens after we get under contract to actually purchase the property. But as far as other tools that I use, the they're kind of more back end stuff to run my business. Like for instance, we have a service that we use that's the 24-hour phone answering service. They take messages and they'll live transfer to us, during regular business hours. So I consider that a tool, even though they're a service. Also use stuff like DocuSign,
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
do
because
the
you're doing a lot of stuff
contracts.
long distance. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We use for mail, since we do all mail, we'll get a lot of letters back. Like sometimes a lot of times we'll get back signed offers in the mail. They won't even call us or anything. They'll just sign the offer and mail it back to us. But I don't have this mail going to my house or anything. We have these mailing locations in a couple of the major markets that we work in, and they basically when the mail comes in, they scan it and then we get an email.
Nice.
So there's no like physically opening any of these letters or anything like that, which is really, really
Awesome.
nice.
So yeah, so basically
um,
like a tool for your lists, a tool for a little bit of due diligence. You're doing all this long distance, right? So you're not traveling out to all
oh
these
yeah, yep.
properties. You're just doing
Nope.
it from your.
I haven't most of them I've never seen. Like we did a road trip last summer, and we actually saw a few of the properties that we owned, so it was kind of cool. But those are the only ones that we ever actually saw in
That's
person.
it's almost
Um,
sometimes better because I don't know about you, but like I tend to get emotionally invested in projects and properties that I'm invested in,
oh
and
yeah,
that's not always a good thing. It can be a good thing, but it also can be a bad thing.
It's funny you say that because those properties that we went to visit, I found myself really liking those, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't sell these. Every single one of them that I
That's
saw.
so funny. Yep, yep.
So
That's happened. It's like, oh
yeah,
yeah, I own
I
that.
really liked them, and then I probably negotiated too hard to, I probably probably was a little ambitious with that side of things, but you know, it is what it is. So, yeah, I don't. It's interesting because it's not like we do send like a photographer and normally a broker to go out to the property and check it
Yeah,
out and things like
that's what your
that.
team's for,
So
right?
I feel like someone on our
Yeah,
team is checking it out at least, but not
yeah,
you know.
yeah. And I think
So,
that's the big thing that keeps people investing in their own backyard. And there's not that's a bad thing to do, but it just keeps you really your opportunity is a lot smaller, right? When you are like, oh, I got to be able to
yeah.
drive to the property within 45 minutes or whatever. It's like, okay, well, depending on what I talk all the time about investment strategy and what you want investing to do for you, and what your goals in investing are may not line up with where you live, right? So that's really
Oh
going to
yeah.
keep you pinned down to, well, you got to really just kind of cater your investment philosophy to what your market's able to produce then, and not vice versa, which is what it should be. um, so I think
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
past
exactly.
that.
Yeah, if you're gonna scale, even if I was doing properties in my backyard here, like it wouldn't make sense to like drive around and see all these properties, even if they're half an hour
Yeah,
away. A lot of times, there's not enough time in the
yeah,
day. So it's better to just pay
yep,
someone to do it.
yep. So let's talk a little bit about a lot of my audience, the whole everyday real estate investor. We're everyday people. We're out here doing stuff just like you. You started with your own, your own personal residence. You're like, I'm a genius. Let's keep doing this, right? So and a lot of people start part time, right? So they're not, hey,
Yep.
I really want to get involved in real estate, but I've got another job. I've got all these other obligations that I have right now. How can I get started? Is this something that you think people can get started with? Some limitations maybe on time, or all the excuses, right? Time and money and knowledge are kind of the three main excuses. So where do you
Yep.
see this fitting into someone that maybe is limited in one or all of those?
Yeah, I think it's actually a model that would work really well for that. Like I mentioned that we have a 24-hour call answering service, and it's great because I don't have to like sit by my phone and like, if I'm doing, like I wouldn't have to answer any of these calls. In fact, I don't. I mean, at this point, I have an acquisition manager that takes any calls and things like that. But at the beginning, the call answering service is great because I could be doing anything in my life, and they would take the call, and then I would just get an email with the notes from the call and about the lead, and then I think as long as you call them back, that same day, generally that's fine, or at least attempt to call them back the same day, you're fine. And a lot of times these people are emailing and texting as well, so that kind of stuff can be done sort of as you can fit it in
Yeah.
your time. I know a lot of land investors that kind of do this type of thing on the side, and they're trying to get to the point where they can, just kind of quit their 9 to 5 if that's what they
Yeah.
want to do. But um,
Awesome.
but yeah, it's one of those things you put in an hour or two each night. You could probably do some, once you get your system set up, you could probably really make it work as
Okay,
well.
awesome. Well, and you also mentioned when we had talked a while back about doing this show, you mentioned a story about your kids, which I want you to share again because I
Oh,
think that's super cool because it's
yeah.
getting your kids involved in the business, and I think it just really shows how quickly this model can work and how little it takes to get started compared to some of these other strategies. So why don't you share that story a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So, my kids, they saw what we were doing with this model. They had formed a corporation. They got did the corporate paperwork and everything. They were going to start up another business. That never really came to fruition. But they had that there, and they were like, "Hey, can you show us how to do this too?" So I was, they're my kids, and obviously I was very interested in that they were taking an interest in this as well. So what they did was they pulled together. They each had $4,000, which they pulled together. So they had $8,000 to start with, and they pulled it together. And then I just um, gave them one of the deals that I had gotten under contract, a smaller one, and I said, "Hey, do you guys want to buy this property and do it yourself? And we'll kind of walk you through the process and everything." And they did. And long story short, they started out with that 8,000, and then just 2 days ago they just closed on another deal, and now their account's sitting at 82,000. Uh, it's been about a year and a half since they did their first deal, or since they bought their first property, but they took about a 6 month hiatus where they didn't buy any properties and other things were going on in life. But so really, and I think in about 5 transactions, they were able to take that 8,000 and parlay it into 82,000, and now it's going to really start
That's
accelerating
awesome.
for them.
Yeah,
So
one thing that just came to mind
yeah.
for so that's great for people starting that just don't have a lot of money. One of the things that I think is really uh, could be a great use of this, and I'm not uh, a expert in these types of tools and that sort of thing, but your self-directed IRAs, right? Like, because a lot of times it's like, oh
Oh
yeah, you
yeah.
can buy this stuff in your self-directed IRA, but the limitations they're pretty limited on how much you can contribute into your IRA,
Yeah.
right? So it's like it sounds exciting, but then it's like, well, how do you get a realistic amount of money in your IRA? If you don't have any money in there right now or something, and someone's starting out, it's like it takes years and years to get something in your IRA with the limitations of your contributions before you actually can have an amount that you can actually go out and
Yeah,
invest.
it's funny.
But this would take, you could start with, your 1 year contribution, and you could actually go out and do something.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I actually just purchased a property with my self-directed 401k, about $13,000 purchase, and we just got an offer in for
Nice.
37.5, and that was just like listed right away. So it's easy to see how that could parlay pretty quickly, and obviously you're not spending any of that because it's got to go back into there, and then you just keep on
Absolutely, yeah.
rolling. So
Especially like your Roths and your I don't know which one you, but like the ones that grow tax free, right? Man,
yep,
yep,
that's what it is. Yep,
absolutely. You know, you're starting with a little bit that's
yep,
taxed up front. That's fine. You put it in there, and then you
yep,
just grow it exponentially. That's a great way to do it. Awesome.
yep.
Um,
Yeah,
what do you think? So it's a different market than it was a year or so ago,
right.
right? So you had a couple, but your
Hmm.
goals haven't changed. You want to do even more business this year, so that's awesome. What do you see as like one of the big opportunities in this market, and are you making any changes to your approach or anything with the where we're at in the market? And the market, I understand that's a
Hmm.
broad statement, right? Because every local market's
Yes.
different, but yeah, we're in challenging times, different times than we were a year ago. So, what are you doing maybe to make adjustments, and what opportunities are you seeing?
Well, first of all, one of the things that I think is pretty cool about this business is the average hold time for us is about 60 days. And that's the time we actually purchase the property to the time that it actually closes on the resale and we get the wire transfer back. Um, so it allows us to actually adapt pretty quickly. So if there's some bigger changes going on, we really notice things slowing down. We're just adjusting our buy prices lower. And the interesting thing about that is I think back to my time as a REO listing broker for the banks. This is like the worst real estate crash ever, 2007, 2008. It list a property for the banks, and they wouldn't, when they list a property, they take no consideration on what it sold for before, or what was owed on the property or anything like that. They were just looking at current
Hmm.
market value. So what would happen is they would price a thing like current market value, which was low, very low. But what would happen is we would get 30 offers in on these properties. Like, so even during the worst market crash of all time, there was just a ton of activity and a ton of people ready to buy. So I just look at that and think, okay, so even if in the worst market ever, as long as it's priced right,
Yeah,
it's going to sell. As long as it's a decent property and it's priced right, it's going to
very
sell.
true. Very true.
So, so I don't see that. I don't see that type of market collapse. I could be wrong, but I don't see that type of market collapse coming. I do, feel it's softening in a lot of areas
Yeah.
and things.
Well, it was
We've been
very
pretty fortunate.
overheated in a lot of markets, so to be
Yes, for
expected, I
sure.
think. So there's a
Yeah.
difference between a correction and a crash, right? Yeah,
Yes, for sure. For sure. I think a lot of people were assuming that same thing was going to
yeah,
repeat itself, and who knows, it might. And that's the one thing I learned about real estate. You can't
yeah,
really predict what's going
yeah.
to
Someone's
happen.
predicting it right, but
Lots of
who is it? I don't know because
yeah, and like a few years ago, there was lots of people out there talking about how this crash is coming, and they're putting all their money in cash and everything. And if they would have done that, a lot of people would have missed out on the biggest
yeah,
one
one
of the
of yeah,
biggest market surges
yep,
ever. So they were 100% wrong. And they were very smart people, I'm sure, but so no one can really tell.
yeah, yeah,
Um, the other thing I like about land is that, especially in the environment that we're in, it's an inflationary environment. So land is one of those real assets that, in theory, should grow in value at least to keep up with inflation. Now, the land values really haven't. They didn't have that huge run up in a lot of areas like residential single family homes because it's more of a cash
yeah,
transaction
yeah.
in a lot of ways. So it's not like people are leveraging, really low interest rates to buy these properties and things. It's always been kind of cash, and
True.
there are some land loans and things like
Yeah,
that,
but
but
very different than
um,
your residential
yeah,
loans. Yeah.
than the housing market.
How are you
Yeah,
marketing your properties on the back end once you because 60 days that's pretty good for bare land.
yeah, yeah. It's all about our approach, really. So our approach is to first of all buy good properties. So there's a lot of properties that come through, a lot of potential deals that come through that we pass on because there's not good property. They have issues. They're just not good properties. Even if I were to buy them
Yeah.
really cheap, I just feel like it's better to pass on some of those. But the thing is that so we buy good properties and we buy them at a really good price, which will allow us to then market them at a really good price, slightly below
There you
market
go.
value.
Yep. Get a good deal, give a good
So if
deal,
it's a good
right?
property, yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is that we use land brokers in all these areas to market the properties for us. We kind of loop them in. We do loop them in on our due diligence process, that we're asking them to give us opinions on the property, any potential red flags, all those things, what they think they could resell it for, and then we give them the listing to resell it. So a lot of these, we're trying to work with the top land brokers in each area, and a lot of these land brokers have large buyer lists for when properties come up. They've they've got credibility when they put something on the market. They can actually,
Generate some
there's people
interest.
actually
Yeah.
paying
Yep.
attention. So yeah, so all those things kind of combine, and plus by doing it that way, it's like a whole half of business I don't have to worry about. I know a lot of land investors like to do that side of things themselves. They market it themselves. They don't want to pay the commission. I'm more than happy to pay a commission because I feel like we're going to get more than that back in return in income. So
That's a good point. Yeah, a lot of I think beginning investors see real estate brokers and a lot of those folks as, now we're saying this as real estate brokers, I know, but
yeah,
it is very true. I mean, you look at it as an expense instead of um, an investment in someone, in a professional that knows what. Now, like anything, there's good and bad realtors, right? There's good and bad real estate brokers, so
yes,
you have
that's
to be
right. You
working
got to
with the
work with the
ones
right
that are
ones.
worth what you're paying them. But yeah, you're giving a big check uh, to your real estate broker, but there's a reason for it, because they're getting the interest and they're getting the exposure and all those things that you think maybe you can do as a for sale by owner, but you really can't. Yeah, there's a lot of online tools and stuff like that, but it's not, you don't have, that doesn't get you the network, that doesn't get you the reputation that you have as a, you don't know all the nuances of how to really get the drive interest and all that stuff. So I think that's a mistake a lot of
Yeah,
beginning investors
and
make,
it's
is trying to
too.
save that money and they're really not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know. And the thing is, as well, on and especially a lot of investors, they don't come from a real estate background. So it really helps to have, if you're working with a very quality agent or broker that can help you with the negotiation side of things, kind of advise you on the contract to make sure you're not missing anything. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, that a lot of value that the right ones
Absolutely,
bring
yeah.
to the
There's a
table.
lot it doesn't take much. There's a lot you could miss, and it doesn't take missing much to cost yourself what it would cost to hire a professional, right? So, um,
Yeah, to really screw
yeah,
some stuff up for
yep,
yourself.
exactly, exactly. So, well, this has been awesome. I appreciate you being on the show. If people want to reach out and learn more about how to invest in land, are you open to them reaching out and connecting with you?
Yeah, yeah, that would be great. I've got a website. It's turningprofit.com. That's a sign I got there. But and on that site, I do a monthly income report, which really goes into detail on everything that happens in our business that month, like the revenue that we took in, the profit that we made, the all the deals that we did. We break them down one by one, like on those deals, like what we bought them for, what we sold them for, the profit, how many days we held them for, and notes on each of those deals. Just gives a lot of insight into what's maybe possible within the business, and if it's something that you feel like you could do yourself. And I've got a community I'm building as well that I just kicked off, so that would and I'm going to be offering kind of a lot of free training. I don't have any sort of course or anything like that to sell at this point. At some point I'll probably be offering some sort of mentorship program, but nothing like that now. Just all kind of free content, just trying to get it out there as much as I
Awesome. Yeah,
can.
that's great.
So
That's that abundance mindset, and doing things like
yeah.
this, and doing the uh, education and the webinars and things like that, just to kind of share what you've learned and help other people do the same, and change their lives. That's awesome. That's what it's all about. So appreciate you being
Yeah.
willing to do that. Nothing wrong with having courses and selling courses, and your time is
No, no.
important. So you can only, the mentorship thing, when you start doing that, I think I mean, that's a great thing too, because you can't, like you said, there's only so much time in the day, so your time is valuable.
Yeah, that's right. And, some people will want a
Yeah,
higher level of
absolutely. Yeah.
service, and eventually we'll be offering
Very
that.
cool.
So
Well, this has been super interesting. I know I'm interested in this. I'm going to be tuning in because I haven't really that's not a sector of the market that I've paid a lot of attention to, but this is cool. This is exciting, and I'll definitely be checking it out more myself. So appreciate you being on the show. Thanks again for sharing so much.
all right, well, thanks a lot, Ben. Really appreciate you
Awesome.
having me.